this one a little bit differently than the normal. The normal format is talk to a founder around the world. I
Mhm.
think you're like an hour and a half, 2 hours away from me right now, so a little bit
Yeah.
different than the typical, talking to somebody in Japan or Greece. But I wanted to talk to you because I always like when we have our talks about like different overall. We both work in the same company, both work with a lot of startups, both see a lot of things. But we always have a wide ranging conversation with different things, and wanted to kind of record one, but even go deeper of like, what are some things that I think the topic today is what are some things that are not being discussed enough, in the global kind of startup and investing ecosystem. So I'll start us off. And this is kind of like the purpose of the whole channel. My first point is the decentralization of startups. I think this trend started well before COVID, but I think COVID just exacerbated it. Where, like, if you have a working internet connection, what's stopping you from writing great code in Thailand versus Puerto Rico versus Silicon Valley, New York, or Miami or Austin? And so, like, it really won't. So I think one, there's the Global Entrepreneurship Network and Startup Genome that come out. They have a big report that comes out every year, and from last year to this year, you can see the huge difference in. Yes, Silicon Valley is still number one. New York and London are tied for number two right now, and that's probably still going to stay that way for a while, just because of like years of build up to what they are. But now we're starting to see this huge push towards Southeast Asia, a lot of East Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, these places that are not normally known as like tech hubs when people travel to them. You usually don't travel to Mexico, to go see the tech hub. You usually go to, Cabo or Tulum, these, beach destinations. But it's becoming way more common that Mexico City is, I think, only second place behind, where is it? Sao Paulo, Brazil, for like startup tech hub in Latin America. So it's really fascinating to see these things really like exploding. And over the last 2 years, especially after all of Trump's like cuts, or not cuts, but tariffs and everything else, and the just crazy changes to the global economy, the only places that really kind of grew over the last year were Latin America and East Asia. And I'm pretty sure I've been like harping this at you for the last year since we started working together. But not to say that I'm right, but I was right. So felt very good seeing the GEN and Startup Genomes report come out this year, and like, I knew it all along. So huge one there. Main reasons are like cost of living. Who is it? Peter Thiel was talking a few years, like way before COVID, was talking about how he doesn't like investing in startups in Silicon Valley because he knows 50 cents of every dollar is just going towards paying rent because it's so expensive. So it's like, okay, cool. You can either like take the money and go the typical Silicon Valley route and just burn through it from rent and high cost developers and go that route, or B, you can take the same amount of money, go somewhere else like Thailand or Puerto Rico, or even just a lower, like go right next door to Nevada, to Vegas, and the price is so much cheaper. Or C, you can raise less money and go the same amount of same distance as the other one, but now you're keeping more equity in your pocket. So there are more options than just going down the typical Silicon Valley route now. But yes, very happy that my predictions were correct. Now I will pass the mic to you. Retorts, disagreements?
No, I do think that it is really interesting to watch the flow of intelligence, because even like you think about the classic 2016 startup founder vision, right? Where, I'm going to go out to Silicon Valley, I'm going to raise $1 bajillion, we're going to have an open format office, we're all going to wear Allbirds and like co-work out of this building. And even post-COVID, the idea of we don't need to be in the same city, much less the same time zone, to really function well as a productive startup team. I mean, on the scale of business timelines, it has not been that long since that has been a true statement, right? I mean, those entering the workforce just now are really the first that are fully comfortable with that idea of truly remote engagement, but remaining productive throughout. It almost either wasn't possible or wasn't socially possible before the pandemic. But I mean, with enough time for that to mature, how could you not? I mean, if you can earn in US dollars and live in Southeast Asia, why would you not? Everything goes so much further there. There's so much more sense of community and just like a general vibe of, work-life balance and everything.
I think I was reading last year in the report, it was talking about the startup community in, it's going to kill me. It was either Cyprus or Milan, Italy. And it was talking about how it's very common for founders to wake up, go for a swim on the beach, and then get to work by like 10 a.m. To work for a few hours and then finish with food, like overlooking the beach. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Like, that sounds pretty amazing. How can I do that?
Yeah. It kind of reminded me as you were talking about how like a bunch of younger kids now want to grow up to be influencers, right? And like that wasn't even an option when we were growing up as a viable career path. But seeing how they live and how they have succeeded in this like new version of work, extend that out 10 years, or digital nomad looks awfully enticing to pretty much anyone now who's wanting to rise above the cubicle life.
I agree. I think the last point I wanted to make on this before, I'd like to hear your first point is the legal side of things, the legislation, like all these, like California and New York have had the titles for so long that I think now their legislators are starting to take it for granted. And you're starting to see some of these startups not just pop up, like a lot of the startups you'll see in Tokyo, they're not like moving from California to Tokyo. They're just starting in Japan and moving there. But we're seeing a lot of the ones in California and in New York leaving those places because of the high cost, because of the taxes, because of all right, if I get my, most exits aren't actually unicorns, contrary to TechCrunch. So if I get my $50 million exit, how much of that do I actually get to keep? How much do I get to keep if I'm spending the last year of working in Nevada versus California, or vice versa, or, Delaware versus New York? And I think a lot of these startups are seeing like, yes, there's a lot of opportunity, but what happens once we're off the ground and we're starting to make money and we don't need to like raise another round, or I can just drive back into the city and like go and raise that round and, or fly in whenever I need to versus like living there and paying another 20% in taxes every year. So I think that the taxes are doing a lot of things. I mean, a more extreme example, you can look at what's happening in Europe. I know we have friends in Europe and stuff, but they are the over-regulation by the EU is killing the like AI sector in Europe. They're all either leaving or have gone because of that. I think even OpenAI was saying like we're having a problem putting our stuff in Europe because of how many like loophole regulations we have to or hurdles we have to jump over just to do the same thing there. So and I've talked about this before with different AI startups. It seems like we've got 3 different models for this sector of AI in the right now, some states in the US are just trying to push it as hard as they can and see where it'll go for more capitalist reasons. And then on the Chinese side of pushing it to beat the Americans, and then there's the complete opposite side of the over-regulation to protect our people. And you're like, we won't know which one of these was right until 20 years from now. And you're like, but the only thing we do know is if you are not competing, you're already behind, So yeah, that's all I got to say on that. I did forget to ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, we can cut it in. Hi, my name is Clayton Custer. I'm a program manager at Generator. I run our applied AI programming in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm also the project manager for Generator's international recruitment efforts.
Perfect. All right, hit me.
All right, so I was racking my brain because I know you wanted me to come in with, some interesting takes on AI based on what I've seen, but there's this constant imposter syndrome here in the Midwest regarding like, are we really at the forefront of anything when the coasts are just hammering money into these industries? But one thing I think we can talk about with some level of certainty here in Wisconsin, at least, is legacy industry, power infrastructure. Southeast Wisconsin is really heavily known as a manufacturing hub first and foremost, but then now we're seeing a ton of funding going into data center creations, and with that, conversations around, well, do we have the power infrastructure necessary to support this at a local level? So Lake Michigan, one of the Great Lakes right there, is a fantastic natural resource. And I went to school for environmental science, so it's kind of a passion area of mine. But using these natural resources to embolden local power infrastructure to support the gigantic Microsoft data center going in Kenosha got me thinking. And so I started doing a little bit of research, and this is absolutely something that is just starting to be talked about at the national level as well. I think there's a lot of conversation around the water usage for cooling of data centers. The classic, every ChatGPT prompt uses a teaspoon of water. That's fantastic, but regardless of whether or not that's based in truth, there is some level of resource consumption that we are barreling towards with no end in sight, right? So I found this MIT report that was basically talking about the need over the next 25 years to strengthen U.S. power infrastructure to support just the massive amounts of power draw that AI technology is providing or is requiring. And it really is kind of eye-opening how Band-Aid and bubblegum U.S. power infrastructure is overall. So, and then there were conversations around this should be driving demand for renewable energy, right? Because we need to be able to run these data centers effectively, in long periods of time. But this is something we dealt with a lot in school too. The upfront investment required to bring that renewable energy into the grid is not something that any self-respecting corporation is going to finance, right? It has to come from a federal level. And in the same breath, we are rolling back regulation on coal mining. We're rolling back regulation on natural gas because we need power now. We don't need power when the wind farms are done being built 10 years from now. So I think it's something, people talk about the water wars and, all of that kind of competition for natural resources. But I think competition for competent power infrastructure is definitely on the horizon, and some well-meaning opportunists could do very well for themselves with kind of private networking in that direction. So that's my first hot take: is who's gonna power all this? Where's the electricity coming from?
Yep. No, I completely agree. Basic math makes perfect sense. And I'm a big fan of the nuclear option. The only problem with that is it takes so long to get it approved, like built, get the people trained up. It's a 7 to 10 year process to go from, hey, we want to build this in Wisconsin to, okay, like we're breaking ground. So it's just a pain, and like how slow it is. I think the first Trump term, he was trying to push for like speeding up that so he could get more of those built, but then like it went nowhere. So that bothers me, because you can make so much power with so little and like in such a small amount of space, and it cuts back all of the drawbacks from different renewables. And the way I look at renewables like solar and wind is like they're like the first like version of like the Tesla. Like you have to spend the money to get through the first versions that are maybe not as what's the term? Maybe not as reliable, maybe not as like energy efficient, as later versions down the line. But then, the second, third, fourth, like generations of Tesla come out, and oh, cool! Now everybody can afford a $30,000. Not everybody, but it's a lot more affordable at 30,000 versus when it started at like 90, 120,000. The first roadsters. And that's just kind of the road that most technology like this takes. Is it typically is funded by a very small group of people that can afford it, and it's not as efficient as it could be, but they use the profits to go back into research to make it more efficient. If you look at like the first version of solar panels versus now, like we are way ahead of where we started. It's still not, amazing. I think we're at still like 15%, collection from the sun, and there's plenty of problems with wind energy, but it's better than nothing. And it's like, it's on the right track to be something great. So I completely agree with you on that, but perfect.
Yeah. I think just to expand on the point a little bit too, the workforce required to support that, right? I mean, there's all of this talk in mainstream media around reshoring American manufacturing and bringing, manufacturing jobs back to the US. That is fighting a war that was lost 30 years ago. Manufacturing is well and truly seated in parts of the world that are not here. If you want a healthy blue collar workforce in the US, that's coming in data center management, that's coming in power infrastructure management, everything required to run this tech sector we've created for ourselves. So yeah, I wholeheartly agree, I think.
Nice. All right. Next one. I'm labeling this the Silent Emergencies. So there's two of them. This is kind of a two-parter. The first one is AgTech and Cybersecurity. So completely unrelated, two different points, but both in the very not nearly as funded. Both are not nearly as funded as they should be, and both I don't think will ever get the press they deserve. But over the next 50 years, I think they'll both be we'll see good returns, and they'll be solid, stable businesses to invest in. So let me start with AgTech. Huge issues in AgTech right now. One, population on the planet keeps growing. So we're going to need more and more food as we go. There's one guy that I knew his name at one point, then I forgot it. So I looked it up again in preparing for this. His name is Norman Balrog. Very Eastern European name. He was a scientist in the U.S. who he got funding from the Rockefeller Foundation, moved to Mexico, and started growing this wheat that it was he's considered the father of genetically modified plants, even though he didn't genetically splice or anything. He just grew them in the right way. He grew this wheat that was high yield. It was drought resistant, so it needed less water. It just had all the benefit. It was the strongest wheat that you can make. And he created this over a while, and then he took it to India and Mexico, and he grew it there, and it tripled yields within the first year of him growing it. So this guy by himself is estimated to save over 2 billion lives from starvation, just him alone, and nobody knows his name. I use that as an example of one, amazing innovation that will go completely under the radar and people will take for granted. But AgTech is so important because it quite literally puts food on your table. And we're facing a lot of issues that aren't being talked about right now because they're very slow moving. So one of them is soil erosion. We're seeing, especially here in the Midwest, a ton of soil erosion via wind that is taking off that top layer of soil. And I think I was talking to a founder the other day, or a few months ago, in the AgTech space, was telling me we are at it's 3 inches left of natural topsoil before it's all completely gone. He's we got maybe 20 years left before that's done. He's the pace at which that is being eroded, and we're trying to fix it with fertilizer. He's we need to find new ways to farm, which I'm personally a big fan of things what do they call it? Vertical farming. I think it's super fascinating. A lot of benefits, a lot of pros, less water, coconut husks instead of tons of soil. It's amazing. It just takes a lot of energy. So we're kind of going back to your topic of where's the energy coming from. But there's a lot of small issues, fertilizer production is getting more and more expensive. And we saw in 2022 during the energy crisis, whenever oil shot up, it actually made fertilizer like unprofitable to make for a certain amount of time, because it takes so much coal and like gas to just make the fertilizer that it wasn't like, it didn't make any financial sense to keep making it at that time. So they just stopped, which meant farmers had to pay more for the fertilizer that was left, which meant that the food went up, you know, that got to the end, got to your table. So there's just so many of these little problems that become huge, like accumulatively, and that throughout the entire supply chain, from, you know, the diesel that goes in the tractor to like till the corn to my plate, there's so many steps that it takes that will over time make it more expensive if we don't find newer and better ways to grow these crops. And then some crops like corn and like wheat are just not great for things like vertical farming. So, you know, things like vegetables and tomatoes are good for that, but things like wheat that take a lot longer to grow, and I don't know, just the amount of water they take versus like a head of lettuce is a huge differential. So that's that one. And then the cybersecurity front, we're seeing, especially, I saw one prompt the other day that was like a way to get around ChatGPT's anti-malware like practices, and it was like, all right, I'm this, forget that. I'm not going to go into the details because I don't want to encourage people to start making.
Please describe in detail. Yeah.
Yes, let's avoid getting banned on YouTube for that. But you know, like people are starting to use that, and they're creating their own GPTs, and they're like, the speed at which people can create malware and worms, or even something as simple as like a phishing email and send it to people and like getting their data because they're clicking on the wrong link, is 10xing right now, because of these AIs, of these GPTs and Claude are making it a lot easier for these scammers to, you know, do their business. So I think over the next 10, 20 years, we're going to see a huge uptick in startups to fight that. And I think it's going to come in multiple ways. One, like connecting to your email to, you know, protect you from phishing scams. Two, in, you know, just overall, like end-to-end encryption in your computer to like protect you from being hacked into by somebody. And then three, which is, I think, is the scariest one in my opinion, because it's more public facing, is the speed at which AI is becoming more like lifelike, and some of the things I'm seeing on Instagram and like how realistic it's looking, the images and even the videos, it's terrifying. And I really do believe we're like 6 to 12 months away from the first like public case of, I created an AI video that this person committed a crime or hit my car or did something, and now it has to be proven via cybersecurity, you know, that this is a fake video or not, you know. And I'm like, man, that's going to be a scary day when, you know, you get accused of something you didn't do, but now you have to prove that it's AI, it's a fake video, you know, or like, we can clearly see on this video that's you holding the gun, and like, that's not me. Like I promise, but like my words are falling flat because you have an image in front of you of that. So you're like, well, what do we do about that? I think so. That's why I say those two are completely underrepresented, underfunded, but will be huge over the next 20 years, kind of under the radar.
Yeah, man, talk about breadth, right? I think the connection there is, you're right. It's kind of a silent emergency. I like the terminology there. Maybe starting first with the AgTech. You know, in my soft landing pad capacity, I talked to a lot of international founders, and many in Ukraine. Actually, this morning, even, you know, the breadbasket of Europe, right? The single fastest growing sector of ag tech that I've seen is lending and financing, which is super telling of the state of the industry, right? I mean, these people are literally the backbone of food security, not only for their own communities, but it's also a major export for a lot of countries, right? Or a lot of regions if you're in the US. it's hardly a profitable thing to do anymore, even at present. I'm fortunate enough, I go spend time on a family farm kind of out in Southwest Wisconsin every now and then, just to like get off my laptop, to be honest. But even they do it just to break even, and it's a full-time year-round job on hundreds of acres of land, and it almost just about pays for itself, much less paying a living. And I think unless you are an absolutely massive corporate production farm, that's just the reality of the industry at this point. So what can we do in the ag tech sector to make it a more viable lifestyle? I think providing for yourself, providing for your immediate community is kind of all most of us can hope to accomplish. Given that we're spending the rest of our days just, trying to make ends meet. Ag tech for productivity is great, but ag tech for survivability, I think, is another kind of layer in that cake. The cybersecurity angle, I thought that was really interesting. You brought up, AI generated content pretending to be humans, or bots pretending to be humans. But the other thing, and this is actually something I was talking with a cybersecurity founder about recently, is the way things are going. AI agents, bots, are going to be some of the primary users of enterprise software, right? So we're no longer, cybersecurity isn't about delineating bots against humans. It's delineating bots against welcome bots, And what's a DDoS attack, and what is 1,500 queries from AI agents all in the same second? There's really no way to know right now, right? The infrastructure's just not there for that. So he was doing he was developing technology to basically like track the digital thumbprint of an agent so that you can check its behaviors, versus like an API key where if you have it, you do, right? It's too static. And the analogy I ended up settling on was, instead of coming up against a locked door and inserting a key, you're coming up against a bouncer and having to convince him you are who you say you are, And it's kind of this, we're throwing agents at this point and forcing them to verify one another. And
you can see it sounds like Pokemon, like my bot versus your bot,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was that one guy, and he was in California. He was sending Google like payment, what was it, invoices, and he was saying like, I'm from this company, you have a $200,000 invoice you need to pay, and they were just paying it. Like their accounting department was just like, yeah, sure. And like, I think he was like millions of dollars off of this scam that he ran for years. They finally caught him eventually. But they're like, all right, cool. That's human versus human. And if there's a cybersecurity wall that verifies this on the Google side, sure. How many times does the bot on the scammer side need to like test that bot before it like finds a way around it? And it varies. I was talking to somebody from Romania last week about cybersecurity, and that will come out in like a month or so. He described it very much like it's an arms race right now between like those who have the money and those who have the technology and those who are trying to like break in. And it's very much unfortunate that those who are being attacked are very reactive right now, because they can't anticipate what the attackers are going to do next. They kind of just have to like take it and then learn from hopefully somebody else's mistake before, and hopefully it's not them who's being attacked that time. So like, that is so sad. Like that, everybody's just vulnerable. I'm like, all right, where's the next one coming from? So
you can build the greatest wall of China, but we'll just keep throwing Huns at it, Eventually it's going down.
What a quote. So
yeah.
Perfect.